I never thought silence could cut so deep. The kind that fills a room when words you never expected to hear slip from someone you love. It was a warm June evening. The kind where the air hums with the promise of summer. And I was in the kitchen of my own house, scrubbing a pot that didn't need scrubbing. The house was alive with the chatter of my familiar son, Daniel, his wife, Claire, and their daughter, Lily, who was 7 and all giggles. They were visiting for the weekend. A rare occasion since Daniel's promotion had pulled him into a world of glass offices and late-night emails. I spent the day cooking, folding laundry, and playing hide-and-seek with Lily, savoring the fleeting moments when her small hand gripped mine. The house, a sprawling Victorian I'd owned for 40 years, was my sanctuary, its creaking floors and chipped paint as familiar as my own heartbeat. It was the home where I'd raised Daniel, where his father, Tom, and I had danced in the living room to old jazz records, where every corner held a memory of love and loss. That evening, as I wiped down the counter, I overheard Lily's voice from the dining room, bright and curious. "Daddy, why does Grandma live here all alone?" I paused, my rag still in hand, waiting for Daniel's answer. I expected him to say something about how I loved this house, how it was my home, how it held our family's history. Instead, his voice, low and casual, sliced through the air. "Oh, she's just the maid, sweetheart. She takes care of the place for us." The world tilted. My breath caught in my throat, and the rag slipped from my fingers. Just the maid. The words echoed, sharp and cold, like a blade slipping between my ribs. I stood frozen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound grounding me. I waited for him to laugh, to correct himself, to say it was a joke. But he didn't. Lily giggled, oblivious, and asked, "So we own this house?" Daniel's reply was softer, but I heard it clear as day. Something like that. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the sink, the water still running. My son, the boy I'd carried through fevers and nightmares, the man I'd supported through college and heartbreak, had reduced me to a servant in my own home, in front of his child, my granddaughter. The betrayal wasn't just in the words. It was in the ease with which he said them, as if my life, my sacrifices, were a footnote in his story. I turned off the faucet, my hands trembling, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't just hurt. It was rage, quiet, burning, and precise. I didn't confront him that night. Couldn't. The words were lodged in my chest, too heavy to speak. Instead, I moved through the rest of the evening like a ghost, smiling when Claire complimented the roast, nodding when Daniel talked about his new client. Lily hugged me before bed, her small arms a fleeting comfort, but even that couldn't dull the ache. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, the same one where I'd rocked Daniel to sleep as a baby. The house was mine, paid for with years of late shifts at the hospital, with Tom's life insurance after he passed, with every ounce of my strength. And yet, Daniel had claimed it, not just in words but in his heart, as if I were merely its keeper. The next morning, I watched them leave. Daniel kissed my cheek, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Claire waved from the car, and Lily pressed her face against the window, blowing me a kiss. I waved back, my smile tight, my heart a furnace. As their car disappeared down the street, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let Daniel rewrite my story. But revenge, I knew, wasn't about shouting or slamming doors. It was about reclaiming what was mine, me dignity, my legacy, my truth. I walked back into the house, my footsteps echoing in the empty hall, and went straight to the study. The deed to the house was in a locked drawer, a document I hadn't touched in years. I pulled it out, the paper crisp despite its age, and stared at my name, Eleanor Marie Thompson. Not Daniel's. Not Claire's. Mine. I traced the letters, feeling the weight of every year I'd poured into this place. And then I began to plan. It wasn't enough to confront Daniel. He'd dismiss me, laugh it off, or worse, apologize without meaning it. No, I needed to make him feel the weight of his words, to understand what it meant to lose something you thought was yours. But I also needed to protect Lily, to ensure she grew up knowing the truth about her family, about me. I thought of my sister, Margaret, who lived across town, the one person who'd always stood by me. She'd raised her own kids in a small apartment, never asking for a dime, always grateful for the little I could share. Margaret had a heart bigger than this house, and her daughter, Sarah, was like a second child to me. Sarah, who called me every week, who remembered my birthday, who saw me as more than just the maid. I spent the next few days digging into Daniel's life. It wasn't hard. He was careless with his emails, leaving his laptop open when he visited. I found messages to Claire about selling the old place when I was out of the picture. He'd already spoken to a realtor, assuming I'd hand over the deed when he asked. The audacity made my blood boil, but it also sharpened my focus. I wasn't just fighting for the house. I was fighting for myself, for the years I'd given to him, for the love I'd poured into a son who'd forgotten what it meant. By the end of the week, I'd made up my mind. The house would go to someone who deserved it, someone who saw me, who valued me, who understood what this place meant. I called my lawyer, a quiet man named Harold who'd known Tom and me for decades. I told him I wanted to change the deed. He didn't ask why, only listened as I laid out my plan. It wasn't enough to give the house away. I needed Daniel to know why, to feel the consequences of his betrayal. But I also needed to find peace, to let go of the anger before it consumed me. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The path ahead was clear, but it was treacherous. I was about to unravel my family, to rewrite the future I'd always imagined. And yet, for the first time in days, I felt alive. This was my story, and I was going to tell it my way. The days that followed were a blur of quiet determination. I moved through the house like a woman possessed, cleaning every corner, not out of duty but to remind myself of what I was fighting for. The oak staircase where Daniel had taken his first steps. The dining room where we'd celebrated his high school graduation. The garden where Tom had planted roses for Methy were mine, woven into the fabric of my life. Daniel's words had tried to erase that, but I wouldn't let them. I spent hours in the attic, sifting through old photos and letters, piecing together the history of this house, of us. Each memory fueled my resolve, but it also deepened the ache. How had my son become a stranger? I called Margaret that weekend, inviting her over for tea. She arrived with her usual warmth, her gray hair pulled back in a loose bun, her eyes crinkling as she hugged me. We sat in the living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, and I told her everything. Her face darkened as I recounted Daniel's words, her hands tightening around her mug. "Eleanor, how could he?" she whispered, her voice thick with disbelief. I shook my head, unable to answer. Margaret had always been my anchor, the one who reminded me I was more than a mother, more than a widow. She didn't push me to forgive Daniel, didn't tell me to let it go. Instead, she listened, her silence giving me permission to feel the full weight of my anger. When I told her about the deed, her eyes widened. "You're sure about this?" she asked. I nodded, my jaw tight. "It's not just about the house, Margaret. It's about what's right." She reached for my hand, her grip firm. "Then do it. But be careful. Daniel's not going to take this lying down." I knew she was right. Daniel had always been stubborn, quick to anger when things didn't go his way. But I wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. The next step was meeting with Harold. His office was a small, cluttered space downtown, filled with stacks of paper and the faint smell of coffee. He greeted me with a warm handshake, his eyes kind but sharp. I laid out my plan: transfer the deed to Sarah, Margaret's daughter, with a condition that I could live in the house until I chose to leave. Harold listened, jotting notes, his pen scratching softly against the paper. "This is airtight," he said when I finished. "But it's going to cause a storm. You ready for that, Eleanor?" I looked at him, my heart steady. "I've been ready my whole life." He drafted the papers that afternoon, and I signed them with a hand that didn't shake. The deed now belonged to Sarah, a woman who'd grown up with nothing but had never stopped giving. She was a nurse, like I'd been, working long shifts at the hospital, always with a smile for her patients. She'd visited me often, bringing coffee or homemade cookies, asking about my day as if it mattered. Transferring the deed to her felt right, like passing a torch to someone who'd carry it with care. But I wasn't done with Daniel. Not yet. I invited him and his family back to the house the following weekend, keeping my tone light, as if nothing had changed. He agreed, his voice cheerful over the phone, oblivious to the trap I was setting. I spent the week preparing, not just the house but myself. I practiced what I'd say, how I'd stand, how I'd look him in the eye when I told him the truth. I didn't want to hurt him, not really. I wanted him to understand, to feel the weight of what he'd done. When they arrived, the house was spotless, the table set with Lily's favorite cookies. Claire complimented the flowers in the vase, and Daniel tossed his jacket over a chair, as careless as ever. Lily ran to me, her arms wide, and for a moment, I let myself hold her, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. But as we sat down for dinner, I felt the tension building, a storm gathering in my chest. I waited until dessert, when the conversation had lulled, and Lily was distracted with her coloring book. "Daniel," I said, my voice calm but firm, "we need to talk about the house." He looked up, his fork pausing midair. Claire glanced between us, sensing something was off. I took a breath, steadying myself. I heard what you told Lily. About me being just the maid. His face froze, his eyes darting to Claire, then back to me. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. Don't. I don't want excuses. I want you to know what you've done. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. Claire's eyes widened, and Lily looked up, confused. I kept going, my voice steady but laced with pain. This house is mine. It's always been mine. And I've decided it's time to pass it on to someone who respects that. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. Mom, what are you talking about? He asked, his voice low, almost a growl. I met his gaze, unflinching. I've given the deed to Sarah. It's hers now. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Claire gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Daniel's face turned red, his eyes blazing. You what? He shouted, standing so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Lily flinched, her crayons scattering. I stayed calm, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. You heard me, I said. You don't get to claim what's mine. Not anymore. He started pacing, his voice rising. This is insane. You can't just give our house away. The word "our" cut deep, but I didn't flinch. It was never yours, I said quietly. You made that clear when you called me the maid. Claire reached for his arm, trying to calm him, but he shook her off. You're out of your mind, he spat. You think Sarah's going to take care of this place? She's nobody. That was when I stood, my chair steady beneath me. Sarah is family, I said, my voice like steel. She's more family to me than you've been in years. The room fell silent again, the weight of my words settling over us. Lily started to cry, and Claire pulled her close, whispering something I couldn't hear. Daniel stared at me, his chest heaving, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and something else, guilt. Maybe, or shame. I didn't back down. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Not just a mother or a widow or a maid, but Eleanor, a woman who'd fought for everything she had. The night ended with Daniel storming out, Claire and Lily trailing behind. As their car pulled away, I stood in the doorway, the deed still warm in my pocket, and felt a strange peace. I'd taken the first step toward justice, but I knew this was only the beginning. Daniel wouldn't let this go, and neither would I. The house felt emptier after they left, the silence heavier than before. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the taillights of Daniel's car disappear into the night. The air was cool, the stars sharp above the roofline, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd gone too far. But then I remembered Lily's innocent question, Daniel's careless reply, and the fire in my chest reignited. I'd done what I had to do. This wasn't just about the house Anna Maria, it was about reclaiming my place in a family that had pushed me to the margins. The next morning, I called Sarah. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright despite the early hour. Aunt Eleanor. Everything okay? I smiled at the warmth in her tone, so different from Daniel's cold dismissal. I asked her to come over, keeping my voice light, not wanting to alarm her. When she arrived, her scrubs wrinkled from a night shift. I sat her down in the kitchen and told her about the deed. Her eyes widened, her mouth opening in disbelief. "Me? Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. I took her hand, feeling the calluses from years of hard work. "Because you see me," I said simply. "You always have." Sarah tried to protest, saying she didn't deserve it, that the house should stay with Daniel's family. But I shook my head, my resolve firm. This house deserves someone who understands its heart. I told her, "That's you." Tears welled in her eyes, and she hugged me, her arms tight around my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I felt a weight lift, a sense of rightness settling into my bones. Sarah didn't ask for details about Daniel, didn't pry into the pain behind my decision. She just held me, and in that moment, I knew I'd chosen the right person. But Daniel wasn't done. By midweek, my phone was buzzing with his calls, each one angrier than the last. I let them go to voicemail, listening later as his voice grew sharper, more desperate. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't do this to us. Call me back." I didn't. Not yet. I wanted him to stew, to feel the uncertainty he'd forced on me. But I also knew I couldn't avoid him forever. He'd come back. And when he did, I needed to be ready. I spent those days preparing, not just for Daniel but for myself. I went through old journals, letters from Tom, photos of Daniel as a boy. I was searching for answers, trying to understand where I'd gone wrong, how my son had drifted so far. I found a letter he'd written me in college, thanking me for always being there, promising to make me proud. I read it over and over, the words blurring through my tears. That boy was still in there somewhere, wasn't he? Or had he been replaced by the man who saw me as nothing more than a servant? On Thursday, Margaret called, her voice tight with worry. "Daniel came by," she said. "He's furious, Eleanor. He thinks I put you up to this." I could hear the strain in her voice, the fear that this would tear our family apart. I reassured her, telling her I'd handle it. But inside, I was shaken. Daniel was lashing out, and I hadn't anticipated how far his anger might reach. I needed to protect Margaret and Sarah, to keep them out of his crosshairs. That night, I sat in the study, the deed locked away again, and wrote a letter to Daniel. Not to send. Not yet. But to clarify my own thoughts. I poured out everything me love for him. My pain at his words. My hope that he'd see what he'd done. The act of writing steadied me. Gave me a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I wasn't just punishing him. I was giving him a chance to change. To confront the man he'd become. But I also knew he might not take it. By Friday, Daniel showed up unannounced. I heard his car in the driveway, the engine cutting off with a sharp finality. He didn't knock, just walked in, his face a storm of anger and hurt. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, his voice low, controlled, but barely. I nodded, gesturing to the living room. He sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped tightly, as if holding himself together. I sat across from him, my posture calm, my heart racing. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. This house site's our home. Lily's home. You can't just give it to Sarah. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. It's my home, Daniel. And you made it clear you don't see it that way. His jaw clenched, but he didn't interrupt. I kept going, my voice steady but heavy with emotion. You called me the maid. In front of your daughter. You made me feel like nothing in my own house. He flinched, his eyes dropping to the floor. It was a stupid thing to say. He muttered. I didn't mean it like that. But his words lacked conviction, and I shook my head. You meant it enough to say it, I said. And you meant it enough to plan on selling this place without even asking me. His head snapped up, guilt flashing across his face. He didn't deny it. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer now. Mom, I'm sorry. Okay. I messed up. But you can't punish me like this. You can't take the house away from Lily. His mention of Lily stung. A low blow meant to guilt me. But I wasn't swayed. This isn't about Lily, I said. It's about you. And what you've done to us. He stood, pacing again, his frustration boiling over. So what? You're just gonna cut me out? Pretend I'm not your son. His voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, scared and uncertain. But I couldn't let that soften me. I'm not cutting you out, I said. I'm giving you a chance to earn it back. To prove you understand what family means. He stared at me, his eyes hard, then turned and walked out without another word. The door slammed behind him, and I sat there, alone again, the weight of our confrontation settling over me. I'd drawn a line, and there was no going back. But as I looked around the room, at the photos on the mantel, the worn rug under my feet, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Daniel would find his way back to me. But if he didn't, I was ready to let go. The weeks that followed were a strange dance of silence and tension. Daniel didn't call, didn't show up, didn't send so much as a text. Claire reached out once, her voice hesitant over the phone, asking if we could talk. I told her I needed time, and she didn't push. I missed Lily's laughter, her small hand in mine, but I couldn't let that pull me back into Daniel's orbit. Not yet. I spent my days tending to the house, gardening, and visiting Margaret, who became my lifeline. She'd bring over casseroles, sit with me in the garden, and listen as I wrestled with my doubts. You did the right thing, she'd say, her voice firm. He needs to learn. But learning, I knew, was never easy. I also spent time with Sarah, who was still reeling from the deed. She'd come over after her shifts, her eyes tired but grateful, and we'd talk about the house, her dreams, her fears. She didn't want to move in, not while I was still here, but I could see the way her face lit up when she walked through the rooms, touching the banister, tracing the patterns in the wallpaper. This place feels like home, she said once, and I smiled, knowing I'd made the right choice. But I also knew Daniel wouldn't let it go so easily. Sure enough, a month later, I got a letter from a lawyer, not Harold, but someone Daniel had hired. It was a formal demand to reverse the deed transfer, citing undue influence and mental incapacity. The words hit like a slap, but I wasn't surprised. Daniel was fighting dirty, trying to paint me as a frail old woman who didn't know her own mind. I called Harold immediately, and he laughed when he read the letter. "This won't hold up," he said. "Your signature's valid, and I've got witnesses. But he's not going to stop. Eleanor." I nodded, staring out the window at the roses Tom had planted. "Let him try," I said. "Harold promised to handle it, but he warned me to be careful. Daniel was desperate, and desperate people did reckless things." I felt a chill, not of fear but of clarity. This wasn't just about the house Anna Maria, it was a battle for my identity, for the truth of who I was. I started noticing small things after that. A car parked down the street for too long, its driver obscured. Phone calls with no one on the other end. Once, I found the back gate unlatched, though I was sure I'd locked it. I didn't tell Margaret or Sarah, not wanting to worry them, but I installed new locks and a security camera, just in case. The house, my sanctuary, was starting to feel like a fortress, and I hated it. But I wasn't going to let Daniel intimidate me. One evening, as I sat in the study, I found an old photo album tucked behind some books. It was one I hadn't looked at in years, filled with pictures of Daniel as a teenager, his grin wide and unguarded. There was one of us at the beach, him holding a sandcastle, me laughing as the waves crashed around us. I touched the photo, my heart aching. Where had that boy gone? I wanted to believe he was still there, buried under years of ambition and resentment. But I wasn't sure anymore. The next day, I got a call from Claire. Her voice was shaky, almost whispering. "Eleanor, I need to see you. Alone." I hesitated, sensing a trap, but her tone was genuine. Raw. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown, away from the house, away from Daniel. When I arrived, she was already there, her hands wrapped around a mug, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked up as I sat down, and before I could speak, she blurted, "I'm so sorry." I waited, letting her continue. She told me everything, how Daniel had been spiraling since our fight, how he'd been obsessed with the house, convinced it was his birthright. "He's not himself," she said, her voice breaking. "He's angry all the time, snapping at me, at Lily. I don't know what to do." I listened, my heart softening for her, for Lily, but not for Daniel. "Why didn't you stop him?" I asked, my voice gentle but firm. "When he called me the maid, why didn't you say something?" She looked down, tears spilling onto the table. "I should have," she whispered. "I was just shocked and scared. He's been so different lately." I reached across the table, touching her hand. "This isn't your fault," I said. "But you need to decide what kind of family you want Lily to grow up in." She nodded, wiping her eyes, and promised to talk to Daniel, to try to make him see reason. As I drove home, I felt a flicker of hope, but it was tempered by caution. Claire's words were sincere, but Daniel was a storm, unpredictable and dangerous. I couldn't trust him to change. Not yet. When I got back to the house, I checked the security camera footage, my heart sinking as I saw a figure lingering near the gate the night before. The image was grainy, but the build, the way he moved it was Daniel. I sat down, my hands shaking, and called Harold again. "He's watching the house," I said, my voice steady despite the fear creeping in. Harold promised to file a restraining order if needed, but he urged me to talk to Daniel, to give him one last chance. I didn't want to. Every fiber of me wanted to shut him out, to protect myself and the house. But I also knew that revenge, however justified, wouldn't heal the wound he'd left. I spent the night thinking, pacing the house, the memories of Daniel's childhood clashing with the man he'd become. I thought of Lily, of the stories I wanted to tell her, of the love I wanted her to know. I couldn't let this end in bitterness, not for her sake. So I made a decision. I'd give Daniel one last chance, not for the house, but for redemption. I'd invite him back, lay everything bare, and see if he could face the truth. If he couldn't, I'd walk away, knowing I'd done all I could. The next morning, I sent him a text. Short and simple, "Come to the house tomorrow. We need to finish this." I didn't know what he'd say, or if he'd even show up. But as I sat in the garden, the roses blooming around me, I felt ready for whatever came next. The morning Daniel was set to come. I woke early, the house still cloaked in dawn's gray light. I walked through every room, touching the walls, the furniture, the photographs, as if grounding myself in their history. This house wasn't just wood and brick. It was a testament to my life, to the love and pain I'd carried for decades. I made coffee, set out 2 mugs, and waited, my heart a tight knot of anticipation. I didn't know what I expected: anger, apologies, or silence, but I was ready to face it. He arrived at 10, his knock sharp against the quiet. I opened the door, and there he was, his face drawn, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just stepped inside when I gestured him in. We sat in the living room, the same place where I'd confronted him weeks ago, the air between us heavy with unspoken words. I poured coffee, the steam rising in curls, and waited for him to break the silence. "Mom," he started, his voice low. "I don't even know where to begin." He looked at me, his eyes searching, and for the first time, I saw something other than anger, vulnerability, maybe, or regret. I didn't let it soften me. Not yet. "Then start with the truth," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. "Why did you call me the maid?" He flinched, his hands tightening around his mug. "It was a mistake," he said, his words halting. "I was tired, stressed." Lily asked, and I just said something stupid. I shook my head, leaning forward. "It wasn't just stupid, Daniel. It was cruel. You made me feel like I didn't belong in my own home." His eyes dropped to the floor, and I saw his jaw work, as if fighting to hold back whatever was rising inside him. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said finally, his voice breaking. I've been under so much pressure. Work, the bills, Lily's school. I thought the house could be a way out, a way to start fresh. I stared at him, the pieces falling into place. "So you were going to sell it?" I said. Not a question but a statement. He didn't deny it, just nodded, his shoulders slumping. The admission should have angered me, but instead, it brought a strange clarity. Daniel wasn't a villain. Not really. He was a man drowning in his own choices, lashing out at the one person he thought would always take it. Me. I leaned back, my heart heavy but steady. "You thought you could take this from me," I said softly. "But you forgot who I am. I'm not just your mother. I'm Eleanor. This is my home. My life." He looked up, his eyes wet, and for a moment, I saw the boy I'd raised, the one who'd clung to me after nightmares, who'd promised to make me proud. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words raw, unguarded. "I didn't see you. Not like I should have." I wanted to believe him, wanted to reach across the table and take his hand. But I couldn't. "Not yet." "Then prove it," I said, my voice firm. "Show me you understand what you've done. Not just to me, but to Lily, to Claire, to this family." He nodded, wiping his eyes, but I could see the struggle in him, the weight of his pride battling with his guilt. I didn't push him further. I said what I needed to say. Now it was up to him. We sat in silence for a while, the coffee growing cold between us. Finally, he spoke, his voice steadier now. "What about the house? Sarah, is it really hers?" I nodded, meeting his gaze. "It is. But that doesn't mean you're out of my life, Daniel. It means you have to earn your place in it." He swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly. "And if I can't?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then you'll have to live with that," I said, my heart aching but resolute. "But I hope you can. For Lily's sake. For mine." He didn't respond, just sat there, his head bowed, the weight of our conversation settling over him. When he finally stood to leave, he hugged me, his arms tight, his breath shaky against my shoulder. I held him back, but I didn't cry. I shed enough tears. After he left, I felt lighter, but not free. The wound was still there, raw and tender, but I'd faced it. I faced him. I spent the rest of the day in the garden, pruning the roses, letting the sun warm my face. Margaret came over that evening, and I told her everything. She listened, her eyes soft, and when I finished, she squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than anyone I know," she said. I smiled, but I didn't feel strong. I felt human, flawed, and hopeful. The next week, I got a letter from Daniel. Not a text, not an email, but a handwritten letter, the kind he hadn't written since college. It was short, but it was honest. He apologized again, not just for the Maid comment but for everything, for taking me for granted, for letting his ambition blind him, for forgetting what family meant. He promised to do better, to be better, for me and for Lily. He didn't ask for the house back, didn't mention the deed. It was just him, raw and open, trying to find his way back. I read the letter again and again, my heart torn between hope and caution. I wanted to believe him, but trust, once broken, Doesn't mend easily. I called Claire, asking about Lily, about how things were at home. She said Daniel was trying spending more time with Lily, talking to her about me, about the house, about what it meant to be family. It wasn't perfect, she said, but it was a start. I invited Sarah over that weekend, and we walked through the house together, talking about its future. She wanted to keep it as it was, a place for family, for memories, for love. I told her about Daniel's letter, and she smiled, her eyes bright. Maybe he's learning, she said. I nodded, hoping she was right. As summer turned to fall, I began to see small changes. Daniel called more often, not to argue but to talk, to ask about my day, to share stories about Lily. He came by one Sunday with her, and we spent the afternoon baking cookies, her laughter filling the house again. He didn't bring up the deed, didn't push, and I didn't either. We were rebuilding, slowly, carefully, one moment at a time. But I wasn't naive. I kept the security cameras on, kept Harold's number close. Daniel's redemption wasn't guaranteed, and I wasn't going to let my guard down completely. But I also wasn't going to let anger define me. I'd taken my stand, reclaimed my place, and now I was choosing to hope not just for Daniel, but for all of us. The house was Sarah's, but the family, I realized, was still mine to fight for. Fall settled over the house like a soft blanket, the leaves turning gold and crimson, the air crisp with change. I found myself spending more time in the garden, tending to the roses, their petals fading but still vibrant against the cooling earth. The house felt alive again, not with the chaos of conflict but with a quiet hope. Daniel's visits became more frequent, always with Lily, sometimes with Claire. Each time, I watched him closely, searching for signs of the man he was trying to become. He was gentler now, more present, asking questions about my life, my past, things he hadn't cared about in years. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and I held onto it like a fragile thread. Lily was my joy. She'd run through the house, her laughter echoing off the walls, her small hands tugging at mine as she begged for stories. I told her about her grandfather, about the roses he'd planted, about the life we'd built in this house. I never mentioned what Daniel had said, never tainted her view of him, but I made sure she knew who I was, not just Grandma, but Eleanor, a woman with a story of her own. She listened, wide-eyed, and once, as we sat on the porch swing, she hugged me and said, "I'm glad you live here, Grandma. It's the best place in the world." My heart swelled, and I knew, no matter what happened with Daniel, I'd done right by her. Sarah came by often, too, her presence a steady comfort. She'd bring sketches of ideas for the house mall renovations, ways to preserve its history while making it her own. We'd sit at the kitchen table, poring over her plans, laughing over coffee. She never treated the house as a prize, only as a responsibility, and that made me love her even more. But I also saw the weight it put on her, the fear that she was caught in the middle of a family she didn't want to break. I reassured her, telling her the house was hers because she'd earned it, not because I wanted to hurt Daniel. She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes, the worry that this gift came with strings. Daniel's letter had opened a door, but it wasn't wide open. I still felt the sting of his betrayal, the memory of his words cutting through me. I kept his letter in the study, tucked into the photo album, a reminder of both his failure and his attempt to make it right. I didn't fully trust him. Not yet. But I was starting to believe he wanted to change. He'd stopped mentioning the house, stopped pushing, and that alone was a shift. But I knew he was still struggling, still wrestling with the man he'd been and the one he wanted to be. One afternoon, Claire came alone, her face pale, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. We sat in the living room, the autumn light casting long shadows across the floor. She told me Daniel had started therapy, something she'd pushed for after our coffee shop meeting. "He's trying, Eleanor," she said, her voice earnest. "He's talking about things he never would before: his dad, his childhood, you." I listened, my heart caught between hope and caution. "What's he saying about me?" I asked, my voice steady. She hesitated, then said, "He's ashamed. He knows he hurt you, and he's scared he's lost you for good." Her words hit hard, stirring a mix of emotions I couldn't untangle. I wanted to believe Daniel was changing, but I'd been burned before. I thanked Claire for telling me, for being honest, and she hugged me before she left, her embrace tight and desperate. As I watched her drive away, I realized this wasn't just about Daniel anymore. It was about all of us: Claire, Lily, Sarah, Margaret, me. We were all part of this tangled web, and I had to decide how much I was willing to forgive, how much I was willing to fight for. That night, I dreamed of Tom. He was in the garden, pruning the roses, his hands steady and sure. He looked at me, his smile warm, and said, "You're doing fine, Ellie. Just keep going." I woke with tears on my cheeks, his voice lingering in my mind. Tom had always believed in me, even when I doubted myself. I got up, made coffee, and sat in the study, the photo album open in front of me. I looked at the pictures of Daniel, of Tom, of us, and felt a resolve settle over me. I wasn't just fighting for the house or for justice. I was fighting for the family we could still be. The next day, I called Daniel. His voice was cautious when he answered, as if bracing for another blow. "Can you come over?" I asked. "Just you and me?" He agreed, and when he arrived, I saw the change in him: his shoulders less rigid, his eyes softer, almost pleading. We sat in the garden, the roses blooming around us, and I told him about Tom's roses, about the day we moved into this house, about the life we built. He listened, really listened, for the first time in years. "I don't want to lose you," he said when I finished, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I messed up, Mom. I know I hurt you, but I want to fix it." I looked at him, searching his face for the truth. "Then keep going," I said. "Keep showing up. Not for the house, but for us." He nodded, his eyes wet, and for the first time, I felt like we might find our way back. As he left, I stood in the garden, the sun warm on my face, and felt a peace I hadn't known in months. The house was Sarah's, but the family was still mine to hold on to. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew I'd face it on my terms, with my heart open but my eyes clear. The fight wasn't over, but I was ready for whatever came next. Winter came early that year, the air sharp with frost, the house creaking under the weight of the cold. I bundled up in Tom's old sweater, its wool worn but comforting, and spent my mornings by the fireplace, sipping tea and watching the snow dust the garden. The roses were dormant now, their branches bare, but I knew they'd bloom again come spring. That thought kept me going, a reminder that even in the coldest seasons, life persists. Daniel's visits continued, steady but cautious, like a man learning to walk again after a fall. He'd bring Lily, and we'd build snowmen in the yard, her laughter a balm for the wounds we were still healing. Claire joined us sometimes, her presence quieter now, as if she were still finding her place in this new dynamic. She'd watch Daniel with a mix of hope and wariness, and I understood her caution. Trust is a fragile thing, rebuilt slowly, brick by brick. Daniel was trying, though. He'd ask about my nursing days, about the stories I'd told Lily, about the life I'd lived before he was born. It was as if he were seeing me for the first time, not as his mother but as a person with dreams and losses of her own. I didn't let myself hope too much, but I let myself feel the warmth of those moments, the possibility of something better. Sarah was a constant, her visits a bright spot in the gray winter days. She'd started small projects around the house, fixing a leaky faucet, repainting the guest room, always asking my permission, always respecting that this was still my home. One evening, as we sat by the fire, she asked about Daniel, about whether I thought he'd changed. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. He's trying, I said. But it's not about the house anymore. It's about whether he can be the man I raised him to be. She nodded, her eyes thoughtful, and I saw the weight she carried, the responsibility of the deed, the fear of disrupting our family further. I reassured her, as I always did, that the house was hers because she'd earned it, not because I wanted to punish Daniel. But I also told her about his letter, about his therapy, about the small steps he was taking. Maybe one day, I said, we'll all find a way to share this place, not as owners but as family. She smiled, her eyes bright with hope, and I felt a surge of gratitude for her heart, for her strength. One snowy afternoon, Daniel came alone, his face serious but not angry. He sat across from me in the living room, his hands clasped, his eyes steady. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about earning my place. I want to do that, not just for you, but for Lily, for Claire, for myself." I listened, my heart quiet, waiting for him to continue. He took a deep breath, his voice low but firm. "I've been talking to my therapist about why I said what I said. About the Maid thing. It wasn't just a slip. It was, I don't know, a way to feel in control. Like I could claim something that wasn't mine to claim." His honesty caught me off guard, piercing the armor I'd built around my heart. I nodded, urging him to go on. "I was wrong," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "Not just about the house, but about you. I took you for granted, Mom. I thought you'd always be there, no matter what I did. And I'm sorry. The words were simple, but they carried a weight I hadn't expected. A sincerity that felt real. I didn't respond right away, letting his words settle, letting myself feel them. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice soft but steady. "But it's not enough to be sorry. Daniel, you have to show it. Every day." He nodded, his jaw tight, and I saw the determination in his eyes, the flicker of the boy I'd raised. "I will," he said. "I promise." We talked for hours that day, longer than we had in years. He told me about his fears, his pressures, the way he'd let ambition twist him into someone he didn't recognize. I told him about my pain, about the years I'd spent building this life, about the love I still had for him despite everything. It wasn't a perfect conversation, but it was honest, and that was enough for now. As he left, the snow falling softly outside, I felt a shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a willingness to let it grow. I called Margaret that night, telling her about our talk, and she laughed, her voice warm. "You're giving him a chance," she said. "That's more than most would do." I smiled, staring out at the snow-covered garden. "It's not just for him," I said. "It's for me, too." The winter days passed, each one a small step toward something new. Daniel kept coming back, kept showing up, not just for Lily but for me. He helped with small chores around the house, fixed a broken shelf, shoveled the driveway without being asked. They were small gestures, but they mattered, each one a brick in the bridge we were rebuilding. I started to see the family I'd always wanted, not perfect, not without scars, but real. Sarah and Margaret joined us for Christmas, the house filled with laughter and warmth, the kind I hadn't felt since Tom was alive. Lily hung ornaments on the tree. Daniel and Claire cooked dinner, and Sarah played carols on the old piano. I watched them, my heart full, and realized that this was what I'd been fighting for, not just the house, but the people in it, the love that held us together. As the new year approached, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. The house was Sarah's, but it was still ours, a place where we could heal, where we could grow. Daniel wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but we were trying. And that, I knew, was enough. Spring came slowly, the roses budding under a tentative sun, the air soft with the promise of renewal. The house felt alive again, its walls warmed by the laughter of family, its rooms filled with the scent of fresh paint and blooming flowers. Daniel's efforts hadn't faltered. He came by every weekend, sometimes with Lily, sometimes alone, always with a quiet determination to prove himself. He'd sit with me in the garden, listening as I talked about the past, about Tom, about the dreams I'd had when I was young. He didn't interrupt, didn't deflect, just listened, his eyes steady, his presence real. Lily was the heart of it all. She'd taken to calling the house Grandma's Castle, a name that made me laugh and ache at the same time. I taught her how to prune the roses, how to plant seeds, how to love this place the way I did. One afternoon, as we knelt in the dirt, she looked up at me, her face smudged with soil, and said, "Grandma, are you happy?" The question caught me off guard, its simplicity piercing. I smiled. brushing a strand of hair from her eyes. "I am now," I said, and I meant it. Sarah moved in that spring, not to take over but to share the house with me. She insisted I stay, saying it wouldn't be home without me. We turned the guest room into her space, filled with her books and sketches, a blend of her life and mine. She and Daniel had started talking, too, their conversations cautious but kind, a sign that the family was knitting itself back together. Claire was part of it, her warmth returning as she saw Daniel change, her trust in him and in Meg growing stronger. One evening, as the sun set over the garden, Daniel asked me to walk with him. We strolled through the roses, their petals glowing in the fading light, and he stopped by the old oak tree, its branches heavy with new leaves. "Mom," he said, his voice low, "I've been thinking about what you said, about earning my place. I want you to know I'm not giving up." I looked at him, seeing the man he was becoming, the one who'd finally started to see me. "I know," I said, my voice soft, "and I'm proud of you for that." He smiled, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "I don't care about the house anymore," he said. "I mean, I love it, but it's not what matters. It's you. It's Lily. It's us." His words settled over me, warm and heavy, and for the first time, I felt the last of my anger slip away. I didn't forgive him completely. Some wounds take years to heal, but I let myself love him again. Fully. Without reservation. We stood there for a long time, the garden quiet around us, the house standing strong behind us. I thought of Tom, of the life we'd built, of the love that had carried me through loss and betrayal. I thought of Sarah, of her heart, her strength, her place in this story. And I thought of Lily, the future we were all fighting for. That night, I invited everyone over: Margaret, Sarah, Daniel, Claire, Lily. We ate dinner in the dining room, the table crowded with plates and laughter, the kind of chaos I'd missed for so long. After dessert, I pulled out the old photo album, showing Lily pictures of her dad as a boy, of Tom and me, of the house in its early days. Daniel watched, his eyes soft, and when Lily asked why I loved the house so much, I told her the truth. "Because it's where we became a family," I said. "And no matter what, that's what it'll always be." Daniel reached for my hand, squeezing it gently, and I squeezed back. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The house was Sarah's, but it was ours, too. A place where we'd fallen apart and come back together. As I looked around the table, at the faces I loved, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds, the sun streaming through my window. I walked downstairs, the house quiet, and stood in the kitchen, where it had all begun. I thought of Daniel's words, of Lily's laughter, of Sarah's dreams, and I knew I'd made the right choice. Not just in giving the house to Sarah, but in fighting for this family, for the love that held us together, even when it hurt. I stepped outside, the roses blooming brightly now, their scent filling the air. I touched their petals, soft and alive, and smiled. This was my home, my story, my legacy, and I'd fought for it not with anger, but with love, with hope. with the belief that we could be better. As I stood there, the sun warm on my face, I knew we were. The house stood behind me, its windows gleaming, its walls strong. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a promise of redemption, a family, of a future we'd build together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole.